The convention season is upon us again, and for this year's drama, Watchtower has chosen to tell the story of Jonah, a tale so outrageous and Pythonesque that even the lead characters in this 45-minute production cannot help but frequently mention the silliness of it all.
A fish? How's that possible?
The news you brought to us this morning, it was heavy.
Then he claims Jehovah sent a fish to swallow him and bring him back.
Is he insane?
I'm a prophet of Jehovah. He's sending me to proclaim judgment against it.
If you don't know what silliness I'm referring to, suffice to say this story manages to include fish-based sea travel, a magic bottle-gourd plant, and animals wearing sackcloth. But anyway, let's get on with reviewing the film, which begins with this lamentably expositional piece of dialogue.
I thought I would find you here.
Joanna, my sister, please sit.
The significance of Joanna being established right out of the gate as Jonah's sister becomes clear as the story unfolds, with Joanna acting pretty much how a stereotypical JW wife would be expected to act. The writers are obviously keen to clear up any confusion that would otherwise have resulted from Joanna emotionally saying goodbye to Jonah.
You're leaving without saying goodbye?
Emotionally welcoming Jonah home.
It's Jonah! He's back! Jonah!
Joanne.
Bringing Jonah bed linen.
Thank you.
And excitedly bringing Jonah food items.
Here, I made these cakes for you. Jonah! Jonah! Jonah, look! I got figs!
Though holding true to the story, arguably to a fault, this newest of Watchtower films suffers from more than the usual levels of abominable acting.
Who's going to tell them what Jehovah said?
I'm sorry, Joanna. I don't know what Jehovah will do, but I just can't do it. It's too much.
Go to Nineveh, the great city, and proclaim to her the message that I tell you.
Yes. Yes, thank you. I will do as you command.
The writers seem keen to stretch the storyline, perhaps in an effort to make it more film-worthy, by showing lots of footage of Jonah walking with the aid of a pointless stick while dramatic music plays in the background. The writers also seem unwilling to address the paradoxical scenario of a god making a law covenant with only one nation of people, only to then also hold other nations to his standards, to the point of threatening to destroy them if they don't comply.
And Jehovah your God has chosen you to become his people, his special property, out of all the peoples who are on the face of the earth. But when has Jehovah ever asked a prophet to go to a foreign land to preach judgment against it?
Jonah, I don't have all the answers.
As for the lead actor, we don't know much about him other than that he really struggles with pretending to cry.
I'm sorry.
I know, my son.
Go, Jehovah, let me die! Take my life!
And he's not very good at climbing out of a boat's deck hatch. Then there is the plot, which, if you don't mind spoilers, I will do my best to summarise. When a Hebrew prophet is given instructions from God to warn the people of ancient Nineveh of their city's impending destruction, rather than simply disobey the order, he decides to travel in the opposite direction to Tarshish, which is in Spain.
You're not going to Nineveh, are you?
No. Tarshish.
No! Jonah, that's the wrong way! Go back!
After buying passage on a cargo vessel, Jonah's voyage begins. But when a storm comes out of nowhere, the boat's captain is indecisive about what to do with the cargo.
Secure the cargo! We're taking on too much water! Throw the cargo overboard! All of it! Now!
His ship in peril, the same captain then becomes inexplicably concerned as to the whereabouts of one of his passengers.
Where's the passenger? He's down below! Why are you sleeping? Get up! Call out to your God! Perhaps the true God will show his concern for us, and we will not perish.
Awakened from what must have been a really good power nap, Jonah stumbles up to the deck of the ship to discover that the crew are remarkably open to the idea of this weather event being linked to his presence on the boat.
What must we do to you to make the sea calm down for us? What must we do?
Lift me up and throw me into the sea, and the sea will calm down for you. For I know that it's because of me that this violent storm has come upon you.
Sure enough, the sailors throw Jonah overboard, whereupon Jonah is immediately swallowed by a whale shark. Not only is Jonah swallowed by the shark, he is also somehow able to breathe and talk inside the animal's digestive tract.
How am I still alive?
Jonah, that's an excellent question. You shouldn't be alive. Or more precisely, you shouldn't be where you are now because it is anatomically impossible for a whale shark to swallow a human. While the mouth of a fully grown whale shark is just about big enough to squeeze in a small person, the esophagus is only a few inches wide and simply cannot accommodate ingesting a man or woman. Whale sharks, you see, eat microscopic plankton and not people. So if you were to accidentally find yourself sucked into the opened jaws of this animal while it is feeding, you would immediately be spat back out again. At this point, a Bible literalist could argue that, God being God, he could have miraculously changed this particular whale shark's anatomy so that it was able to take on passengers. However, I would argue that if God really wanted to get Jonah from point A to point B, he could have snapped his fingers and teleported Jonah, Star Trek style, into Nineveh's main square, rather than orchestrate this silly, implausible fish transportation story. A God who would do things in this convoluted way, and who deliberately makes his actions difficult to believe or explain, is a God who delights in confusing people. Anyway, back to the plot, and a relieved crew of the boat find that the storm has passed. Immediately they decide that sacrificing animals to Jehovah by way of saying thank you would be a prudent measure.
He gave his life for us.
Our gods did nothing.
We should sacrifice to his God for sparing us.
Meanwhile, we go back to the shark's somehow oxygenated belly, where Jonah, who is slowly dissolving in whale shark stomach fluids, prays to Jehovah for forgiveness.
Oh, Jehovah, out of the depths of the grave, I cried to you for help. Please hear my voice. I know I have been driven away from your sight. How will I gaze again upon your holy temple?
Fortunately for Jonah, these prayers work, and he is finally jettisoned onto a beach. Some passers-by who find Jonah on the beach are kind enough to tend to him without commenting on his smell.
What is your name?
Jonah. My name is Jonah.
Grab his other arm. We need to get him to the house.
And Jonah is taken to their home for food and shelter. While Jonah eats, no doubt reflecting on his 3 days as humanity's first ever submariner, Jonah is questioned by some children who seem remarkably unfazed by the whole fishy incident.
Papa says that you were swallowed by a big fish.
Yes.
Why would a fish swallow you?
Well, I was in the water.
Why are you in the water?
I was on a ship. Then I was in the water.
Having recovered from his ordeal, Jonah decides to return home, where, after telling his family his incredible story, he remains indecisive about what to do next.
So what will you do now?
I don't know.
Finally, after Jehovah interrupts his sleep again and repeats his instructions, Jonah travels to Nineveh, where his message of judgment is initially greeted with understandable skepticism.
In just 40 days more, Nineveh will be overthrown. In just 40 days more.
Who could possibly overthrow our city?
Is he crazy? He looks like an Israelite.
But skepticism soon gives way to outright gullibility.
Listen, if we repent, maybe his God will have mercy on us. True God will overthrow Nineveh. True God has spoken.
And a royal decree is issued for the people to take Jonah seriously and wallow in sackcloth and ashes just in case he is right.
By the decree of the king and his nobles, no man or beast, herd or flock, should eat anything at all. They should not take food, nor should they drink any water. Let them be covered with sackcloth, both man and beast, and let them call earnestly to God, and turn from their evil ways.
In obedience to the decree, even animals and babies are made to put on sackcloth, because apparently Jehovah is able to tell how sorry you are by your willingness to wear packaging. After the 40-day deadline passes with no apparent divine annihilation, Jonah goes out to the desert and suddenly becomes fixated with building a rudimentary sun shelter. And God finishes the job by making a bottle-gourd plant miraculously grow to block out the sun's rays, before sending a worm to eat the plant and make it wither and die. To say that Jonah was upset about losing his bottle-gourd plant would be an understatement.
I have a right to be angry. So angry I want to die.
But though it may look like God is just basically arsing around with Jonah at this point, it turns out the whole plant thing is intended as a profound lesson on morality.
You felt sorry for the bottle-gourd plant, which you did not work for, nor did you make it grow. It grew in one night and perished in one night. Should I not also feel sorry for Nineveh, the great city, in which there are more than 120,000 men who do not even know right from wrong, as well as their many animals?
As noble and compassionate as God's words may appear, they don't answer the question of why he threatened to exact punishment on the Assyrians to begin with, a people who were not covenanted to obey him or observe his long list of rules. Are the inhabitants of Nineveh also expected to walk the 700 miles to Jerusalem to offer sacrifices at the Jewish temple from this point forward? And speaking of sacrifices, how is a God who must be appeased with a steady stream of animal bloodshed suddenly an advocate for animal welfare? Anyway, having received his moral lesson, Jonah re-enters Nineveh, where he should, by all rights, have been met with anger and derision for predicting divine destruction that never came about. Instead, he finds the people are smiling at him and still wearing sackcloth, and one boy even comes up to him and thanks him for being a messenger of something that didn't happen.
Are you Jonah?
I am.
Mommy says you saved us.
No, Jehovah saved you. I was just a messenger.
Thank you.
Jonah then returns home to his wife, sister, and the film ends with a not-so-subtle message to the effect that Jehovah's Witnesses who are watching this should be ready and willing to do whatever Jehovah asks them to do.
Was it hard to write about all that?
Painful.
So, what will you do now?
Whatever Jehovah asks me to do.
This closing scene, by the way, is the most disturbing part of the film. When you are a Jehovah's Witness, you are expected to obey your leaders to the point of shunning your disfellowshipped family members or even dying rather than accepting a blood transfusion. Manipulation as potent as that unleashed here will have a very real effect on the many witness adults and children who will be made to watch the Jonah drama when attending the convention program. Overall, however, when watching this film, I found myself laughing more than being disturbed or frustrated. It is, for the most part, a cringe-worthy spectacle that cannot help but reveal the mentality of its makers. For example, when Jonah first arrives in Nineveh, he helps a beggar by giving him back his begging bowl. You're watching this thinking, rather than just give the guy back his bowl, why not put a few coins in it? Then, later in the film, when Jonah is walking through a repentant Nineveh, he looks on as a man hands over the same bowl, but this time with bread in it, basically doing what Jonah should have done to begin with. This small detail perfectly encapsulates the JW mentality toward charity. In the view of most witnesses, Satan's system is doomed, and charitable giving is therefore pretty much a waste of time unless it is giving that benefits Watchtower. That is why witnesses only tend to give aid assistance to the benefit of other witnesses, leaving so-called worldly people to show what real charity is all about when disaster strikes. But there was much more to this film that I enjoyed. I love that the makers have fallen into the trap of depicting an already ridiculous fable in such a fastidiously literal manner. By doing so, Watchtower has produced a story that is entirely unrelatable. And I'm not just talking about the fish transportation part, which is plain bonkers, but especially the vivid display of credulity by the people of Nineveh. Apparently, the Watchtower writers are incapable of seeing the irony in their creation. They have brought to life a confused, conflicted, insecure man who claims to take his instructions directly from God and who expects and receives blind obedience even though his warnings don't come to pass. Watchtower has been warning about Armageddon going all the way back to Charles Taze Russell, with their promised apocalypse and societal meltdown nowhere to be seen. If anything, the quality of life on planet Earth has improved dramatically over the nearly 14 decades since the first Watchtower magazine rolled off the press, to the point where if you could choose a point in history in which to be alive, you would realistically have to choose the present. But somehow, like the Assyrians, new generations of Jehovah's Witnesses are manipulated into believing every word of Watchtower's constantly regurgitated doomsday narrative, and fall over themselves to thank the latest generation of Watchtower leaders for selling them the same fish story regarding something that was never going to happen to begin with. Thus concludes my review of the new drama, The Story of Jonah, A Lesson in Courage and Mercy. If you've enjoyed this video, please don't forget to subscribe, and as always, thank you for watching.